All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving straight into Chapter 4 of Don Quixote. Honestly, if you want to totally understand Miguel de Cervantes' absolute genius and the whole tragicomedy of his famous knight, you literally just need this one chapter. It's the whole shebang in a bite-sized package. We're talking soaring ideals, immediate disaster, and some seriously fascinating psychological defense mechanisms. So let's just get right into it. What actually happens when a guy who's read way too many fantasy books tries to apply fictional rules to the gritty, unforgiving, dust-choked roads of 17th century Spain? Well, spoiler alert, it creates this hilarious but honestly kind of tragic friction between romantic fantasy and harsh reality.
And that kicks off with a triumphant departure, filled with high hopes and brisk trots.
We start right at dawn. Don Quixote is leaving the inn, and he is just on top of the world. His heart is basically bursting with pride because, hey, he's finally been officially dubbed a knight. But, even knights have to do laundry. Realizing he's missing some pretty basic necessities, he turns his horse, Rocinante, towards home to grab some money and clean shirts. Oh, and to recruit a squire. He's already mentally picked out a poor farm laborer neighbor for the gig. And Rocinante? The horse recognizes the road home and is practically floating, stepping out so briskly he barely touches the dirt.
But things take a turn with the supposed rescue of Andres, which is really just a masterclass in making things worse. Trouble finds our knight almost instantly. He hears cries and discovers a young boy named Andres tied to an oak tree getting whipped by his master, a wealthy farmer named Juan Haldudo. Now, the disconnect here is just massive. In Quixote's head, he is pulling off this flawless, heroic rescue, demanding the farmer untie the boy and swear a sacred oath to pay his back wages. But in reality, Quixote is completely trusting the word of a known abuser, and he's leaving a vulnerable kid totally unprotected the absolute second he rides off.
He literally forces Haldudo to unbind the boy, and then drops this incredibly dramatic threat. I swear to come back and hunt you out, though you should lie closer than a lizard. He tells the farmer to pay up reel by reel. No need to pay him in fancy perfumes, just cold, hard cash will do. Having delivered this fiery warning, Don Quixote genuinely thinks he nailed it. He turns his horse and trots away, basically giving himself a mental high five for being the greatest knight alive, completely oblivious to how the actual world works. And here is the tragic kicker. The master takes a sevenfold revenge on poor Andres the moment Quixote is out of earshot. The literal second this crazy knight is gone, Haldudo ties the kid right back to that tree and flays him so viciously that Andres feels like his life is practically over. This is such a vital takeaway for us. Quixote's grand theatrical intentions, they actually make the real-world suffering so much worse. He's treating life like a storybook and totally ignoring basic, cruel human nature. Moving on to his encounter with the Toledo merchants, where he demands fealty to a ghost. So blissfully unaware of the absolute disaster he just left behind, Quixote keeps riding and runs into a group of traveling silk merchants from Toledo. Naturally, to his mind, they aren't merchants, they're obviously a band of rival knights, so he plants himself right in the middle of the road and flat out refuses to let them pass. Not unless they confess that the most beautiful woman on earth is Dulcinea. Keep in mind, this is a woman he is essentially entirely made up in his head, loosely based on a peasant girl who literally has no idea he exists. Well, these merchants figure out in about 2 seconds that they're dealing with a madman. One sharp-witted joker decides to mess with him a bit, pragmatically asking for some proof. He basically says, look, buddy, we don't know this lady. Just show us a portrait, even if it's the size of a grain of wheat, and even if she happens to be blind in one eye and oozing brimstone, we'll totally agree with you just to keep the peace and get on with our day. Oh man, Quixote does not take that well. He is deeply, deeply offended. To even suggest that his perfect, idealized lady love might be humpbacked or ooze sulfur, that is pure blasphemy. He completely loses it, screaming that she distills only ambergris and civet, which were these extremely expensive, rare perfumes back then, and that she is perfectly straight like a spindle. He's out there aggressively defending the honor of a total fantasy against the sarcastic teasing of a very grounded, practical merchant. Which naturally leads to Rocinante's disastrous fall because, well, gravity always wins. Burning with rage at this insult, Don Quixote decides his lance to do the talking. But watch how fast this heroic charge turns into an utter slapstick disaster. 1 second in, he is this terrifying, vengeful warrior. 3 seconds in, His weak-old horse Rocinante trips right in the middle of the charge. By second 5, Quixote is tumbling violently through the dust. And by the 10-second mark, he's completely pinned to the dirt, weighed down by his own rusty armor. It's ironic, right? He is quite literally trapped by the trappings of chivalry.
And that brings us to the muleteer's wrath and the brutal cost of chivalry.
So he's stuck face down in the dirt like a flipped turtle, but does he stop? Nope. He keeps screaming insults, calling them cowards, blaming his horse. But words have consequences out here. This non-stop verbal abuse finally provokes one of the muleteers traveling with the merchants. And the response is this terrifying, jarring violence that completely shatters the comedic tone. The guy grabs Quixote's own lance, snaps it in half, and thrashes this helpless old man with the splinters so hard the book compares it to milling a measure of wheat. It's a really stark reminder that the real world doesn't play by noble fairy tale rules. But here is the wildest part. Despite getting brutally beaten, Quixote's delusions somehow survive intact. This is his ultimate psychological magic trick. Instead of realizing, hey, I'm a battered old man who just got assaulted on a dirt road, his brain completely reframes it. He actually considers himself fortunate. He convinces himself that getting nearly beaten to death is just a standard hazard of the job for a famous knight. It's just another dramatic plot point in his glorious biography. And of course, it was still entirely the horse's fault. So, what happens next with our knight face down in the dirt? Eventually, the merchants and the muleteer pack up and leave. The dust settles, and our battered protagonist is left completely alone. Which leaves us with a really fascinating question. How on earth is he going to get out of this? He's in a massive physical and psychological mess. He can't stand up, he's miles from his village, and he has successfully alienated literally everyone he's met. This is exactly where the story shifts from wacky comedy to genuine, nail-biting concern for this delusional man's survival. Well, in our next explainer, we are going to dive into Chapter 5, looking at his eventual, very humble rescue, and the completely wild fantasies he uses to comfort his shattered ribs. It really leaves you wondering just how deep this madness goes. Does the pain finally break his fantasy, or does his mind retreat even further into a world of captive knights and enchanted castles just to survive the sheer humiliation of it all? Think about that for a second. How often do we construct our own elaborate fictions just to avoid dealing with the painful realities right in front of us? We'll see how Quixote handles it next time.